Окей, запись мы делаем? Okay, welcome everyone to the Center of Econometrics and Business Analytics seminar series. Today we are having Evgenii, Gilenko, Sofiia, Buravaya, and Valeria Nemceva with the talk about improving performance of state museums during the COVID-19 pandemic, in the case of Russia. We have approximately 1 hour, and do you want the questions during the talk or at the end? And could you share your screen, please?
Yes, sure. I would like to warn that we would like to switch between screens among the participants of our talk to present our parts. Yes. Do you see the presentation? Is everything clear? Yeah, okay. Yes, as it was mentioned before, we are having a talk on the improving the performance of museums during the COVID-19 pandemic in the case of Russia. And to get the ball rolling, I would like to start with the relevance of our research. Of course, all the spheres of the economy suffered a lot due to the pandemic. However, the art sphere and the cultural sphere might be the one to suffer a lot, as both public and private museums proved to be extremely vulnerable during the lockdowns. And the network of European museum organizations held a massive study on the effects of the COVID-19 on the museums. And mass museum closures led to the income losses in the museums up to 80%, which is huge. So the government needed to react, and they provided the extensive emergency support. Yet, surprisingly, 50% of the museums had not considered looking into alternative funding sources. And according to the questionnaire held by NEMA, they haven't seen an opportunity to find sourcing in launching the online activities. So the online services were only to interact and not to lose the visitors during the sporadic times of the pandemic. Speaking about the Russian Federation, also the effect was negative, and considering situation in Russia, cultural industry shrunk by almost a half, and in some cases also the losses of the financial losses reached up to 80%. And the federal state museums in Russia gained public help, as the government assignments have been reduced without reducing the allocation of the subsidies, and also the payment of the corporate income tax has been postponed for cultural institutions in Russia. Of course, to retain visitors, museums had to start numerous activities to interact during the pandemic. You can see some of the examples on the screen. However, the questions, well, were the online programs efficient? The question is still relevant because some museum representatives say that they need to acquire additional skills and improve digital literacy, and there were difficulties with recruitment, and more than half of the museums have employees engaged in digital projects, which is not actually their main activities. So people had to study when a pandemic came, how to organize online lectures and online exhibitions. And of course, if we speak about Russia, it was quite complicated in here because the opportunities to go to online, they correlate with the financial abilities of the museum. So it was quite a challenge for museums to go to online. So in light of moving to online museum, there are two key problems in art analytics for today. The first is the art authenticity dilemma, and the second is the cost disease of cultural organization. As of the first problem, they say that an authentic artwork has a special aura. It was called an aura by philosopher Walter Benjamin. However, to date, art historians prove that there is something unique, even if the artwork is fake, even if the its author's reproduction or a student imitation, or even a fraudulent fake. So today we have a question: does the online art have such an aura, and can online museum be viable? Speaking of the cost disease, of course, we know that museums are non-profit organizations. Their goal is not to make money. And traditionally, the costs of the museums primarily exceed their income. So nevertheless, when people visit the museum or do not, the employees of the museum have to maintain a special temperature. They have to restore artworks. They have to keep it safe. So it takes huge money and resources to maintain a museum. And the director of the Hermitage Museum, Mikhail Piotrovskiy, proposed to introduce the museum minimum wage as a mandatory governmental payment to support cultural organizations during the sporadic times such as pandemic. Nevertheless, the long-term return from cultural organization to the region exceeds material investments. There is still a question: should such support be strategically strengthened in the sporadic situations? Considering the above described challenges, our team set a goal to try to understand the influence of the different factors on the readiness for visitors to participate, to go to online museums. In correspondence to the goal, we have developed and run a survey, and to estimate the influence, we will be using the partial least squares. Let's move further to the theoretical framework. So to achieve the goal with the literature review, we have created the following model. You can see it on the screen. And the first group of the hypothesis is concerned commitment to a museum and the financial loyalty to a museum. These hypotheses are derived from a dynamic model of customer loyalty proposed by Kostevel, which is actually a marketing concept. So the author of the concept says that on a higher stage of customer-firm relationship, there is a dyadic value. So when customer compares the obtained value in time with the money he paid for the value, it might be unequal. So when a museum visitor appreciates content provided by cultural institutions and he understands the perceived benefits, he might think that the revenue obtained by a museum might be less than the money he paid for a museum to obtain such values. So you might think, well, we're speaking about non-profit museums, then why are we even talking about the concept of finance, of paying to the museum? If we turn to the constructivist theory of Simmel, we could see that the acquisition of any value is only possible when something has to be sacrificed to obtain it. Surprisingly, when we try to obtain aesthetic value, we can also rely on the concepts. So it's been proven that even museums will value the artwork that they have bought on their own money than the artwork that was a present for the museum. So we can say that visitors of the museum kind of vote by their money to go to a certain museum, to pay to perceive the value from the exact museum. So our first research hypothesis is that commitment to a physical space of a museum or a gallery positively affects the willingness to visit one online. The second hypothesis is that commitment to a physical space of a museum or gallery positively affect the willingness of visitors to make donations to a museum or a gallery. And the final hypothesis in this group is that financial loyalty to a cultural institution increases the willingness to visit a cultural institution online. So if I'm really adherent to a brand of a certain museum, I will perceive any type of the activity that this museum is producing. For example, if I really love the Hermitage Museum, for me, it doesn't matter whether I go to a certain exhibition or whether I go to the exhibition online, because I really am committed to this museum. Let's move further. The second group of hypotheses is about the concept of a sensitivity to art, which comprises, in our case, from the educational profile, professional connection of a person to art, and the index of the sensitivity to art, which will be unveiled and described in further slides of the presentation. So when we talk about remote visit to a museum, we can not say that it is equal to an offline museum, to an offline visit, because of course we cannot sense everything that we sense in a museum, because as Piotrovskiy says, that any aesthetic experience entails multiple individual interactions in given context over time. So we are out of the context when we are out of the museum. However, when it comes to experiencing artworks through digital form, Locher noticed a unique phenomenon called a facsimile accommodation. So when individuals understand that they are looking at a copy or a digital copy, they are focused on the perceiving the artwork in other ways. So they can zoom in to look for details. They are, in a sense, looking for meanings in the picture rather than trying to focus on physical properties of the artwork, such as size and the colors. So in a way, we expect that people who are really into art, they will accept the online format as it gives them the opportunity to unveil new vision on the artwork. Speaking about the last group of our hypothesis, it is about the value of online museum programs. So in recent papers, Zolo found that digital experience inside a museum positively impacted the loyalty for those initially technologically minded visitors. So we can say that online program gives us new value. We can look at the exhibition in absolutely another perspective. So the higher we see the value, the more we are ready to go to the online format. And we were also trying to look at this from a perspective of co-living with school children, which means that when parents and children are together at the lockdown, they need to find ways to educate, to have spare time together. So a museum could be the institution that provides with everything that is needed during the pandemic for both parents and children. So overall, here you can see our hypothesis in a list, and my colleagues will tell you the results of the analysis. Evgenii, please.
Thank you, Sofiia. Dear colleagues, hello to everyone. I will share my screen and take it from here. For us, I'm sorry, I will just adjust my screen a little bit. For us to think a little bit more about the sort of the mechanism of decision making on the one hand, and actually to introduce a couple of more manifest variables to this model, which was designed. Specifically, here we talk about the index of preference of the online formats and the index of sensitivity to artworks. Here is quite a simple utility model of museum visitors' preferences for the specific type of excursion. Basically, this developed model will allow us to, on the one hand, to take a deeper look into the mechanism of decision making and obtain some extra interpretations about this. And on the other hand, actually, it allowed us to employ specific information which was asked as questions in our survey on the subjective, of course, maximum and comfortable prices that the respondents were ready to pay both for the online and offline formats. So as a result, the respondent gave us four numbers basically. And here's a way, a vision of how to try to employ this information to develop some better understanding of the mechanism and construct these indices. So we start with an assumption that there is some sort of Sunday budget. So when a museum visitor plans their visit to this museum alone or with a family, they of course have some pile of money, and formally speaking, this pile of money can be split between the two options. The excursion itself will denote it as good X excursion, and this will be a binary variable, obviously. So whether you take the excursion or not, as of now, it's not really important which format it is, online or offline. Later, I will draw this this difference. And the other option is obvious, kind of infinitely divisible good. We can think about this as just the rest of the money which can be spent on something else. Or if you like, since this model was developed in summer, I thought about cherries as the perfect example of infinitely divisible goods. So basically, when you visit a museum, you want to have probably several types of satisfaction. You want to visit the excursion, and you want to eat something nice, just to have a nice Sunday. So this is the story. We also assume that in this model, we assume that only one type of excursion, online or offline, can be taken per day. So this is a reasonable assumption, which means that, well, in order to get a full impression, it is highly unlikely that you are going to combine two or more excursions the same day. Well, unless probably there is zero price for such excursions. But again, anyway, it takes time. So it kind of seems to be a plausible assumption here. The model is aimed at constructing a simple version of a map of different curves of this respondent as projections of some multivariate utility function from the nth dimensional space on the traditional Cartesian plane. What else? Here we assume that a readiness to pay more reflects higher loyalty. So again, well, this is disputable assumption, but as a starting point, it seems relevant. Also, again, as I mentioned in our questionnaire, there were these questions on subjective number, subjective prices, which are comfortable for the respondent to pay for this excursion, and the maximum excursion price the same story. And we assume, and actually it was supported by our empirics, that this price, the comfortable price, is usually non-negative. Some of the respondents said that well, the only prices they are going to pay is zero prices. And also we assume that the comfortable price is usually less than the maximum price to be paid for an excursion. Although they may coincide, and in quite several answers, we saw this picture exactly when the prices coincided, actually. One final assumption to be made here, probably about the principal thing, the principal preference of the offline format over the online format, which Sofiia briefly mentioned before. So the COVID-19 situation, I think, forced to re-understand, rethink how the values are split, how the online format and why the offline format may be more valuable as compared to the online format of the excursion. So we assume here that the preference of the offline format over the online format is caused by one of two reasons, probably. Maybe both. The person needs to feel the authenticity of artworks, so they need to feel this aura of the museum, and this is quite a relevant assumption in the COVID-19 pandemic. There's a need to change scenery, just to go someplace different than home, and well, entertain themselves somehow else. So these are the assumptions. The general discussion, general construction of this model is based on quite classical approach. So I think I will just cover it in brief. First of all, the obvious thing, sorry for not a perfect screenshot here, about the budget constraint. So here we have this binary variable which represents the choice of this excursion, whether to take it, to not take it, to be more correct, 0 and 1 when the person takes the excursion. And the second good why. So the general outlook of this budget constraint for this Sunday budget looks like this. It's a piecewise linear structure where obviously we have the angle of this line being the ratio of these two prices, px over py. I think this is quite clear and quite traditional outlook of the budget constraint like this. What is important to this model is that based on the outlook of this this budget constraint, we can reconstruct a model, a simplified model, of course, of the overall outlook of the indifference curves, which may represent the preferences of this visitor. So if we think carefully, well, again, it's not something radically new, but the general outlook of these indifference curves given in red here. So in black, we have different situations for the budget constraint. I will briefly cover them in a second. And in red, we have this indifference curves. And actually, this is where we start. The subjective maximum prices, and as of now, we construct a model of individual preference. So surprisingly, maybe the maximum prices actually allow us to reconstruct the this left-hand side piece of this indifference curve. Well, again, it's a piecewise linear structure, but well, the general outlook is like this. Why? The answer is very simple. Once the price is higher, so the budget constraint, this black line, is steeper, then the obvious solution in this situation, this optimization problem, would be just to spend all the budget, Sunday budget spent on cherries. So not taking the excursion. Again, the type of the excursion is not really important. As of now, we talk about the general outlook of this model. When the price, this price for the excursion is equal to the maximum which the person can afford, then we obviously have this coincidence of these two lines, two pieces, the budget constraint and the left piece of this indifference curve. And this is exactly what allows us, based on the empirical information, if needed, to reconstruct this slope. The right-hand side part of this indifference curve is obviously horizontal, or maybe even slightly sloped. It does not matter much, because to find out the solution in this case, in this model, we only basically need 2 points here, this or this one. So this is the value of this consideration, that the maximum price, as named by the respondent, by the visitor, allows to understand the slope of this left part of their indifference curve. The more the better. We have, if we have prices of excursions being smaller as compared to the maximum price affordable to the visitor, then obviously the solution will go somewhere here. The angle will not be that steep, so basically the person will afford buying this this bundle of these two products, cherries and excursion, somewhere here, and obtain some level of utility. And as an extreme case, again, this is a simple but quite relevant model. If the excursion goes for free, so the price is 0, well, it's no contradiction. The optimal solution will be somewhere here at point A, and in this case, both things will happen. The person will take the excursion and will spend all their money on the second good. So very relevant, and again, from D to A, we get higher level of utility. So this first consideration actually allows to introduce and to try to rethink in our specific case when we talk about museum excursions, allows to try to well, to understand something about the internal mechanism of this kind of decision making. In this case, we will compare. If we compare the subjective, again, maximum and comfortable prices as named by this respondent. So again, I decided not to repeat it here. So this is the maximum price. This is the angle of the budget constraint when the price of the actual price of the excursion is exactly equal to the maximum affordable price for this visitor. This is px1 asterisk is the comfortable price. So if we consider these three principal situations, when we have the maximum price, we have the comfortable, again, as named by the person themselves, the comfortable price, and we have 0 price for the excursion. We can think of what these pieces, these differences in utility may represent. Obviously, when the excursion goes for free, we spend all this Sunday budget on the second good, and we get the maximum of utility that we can get for this money. But what happens if we compare this difference? So this is the level of utility that the person gets when the price for the excursion is coincides with the comfortable price. It means that they will have to give up on some number of utils, the measurement units of this utility. And well, if we think why, what would be the mechanism here? What would be the motivation here? The name that comes to mind, well, probably not the perfect one, so we are open to other suggestions, but it's kind of honesty effect or something like this, because well, people on average, in general, they understand that for the museum to exist, for the excursions to go on, we need to pay some money to support this stuff. So this is the difference. So we can somehow estimate, if necessary, this honesty effect, so some consciousness effect about these excursions. And the second segment is also important. This CD, this difference. This is again the maximum price, the ratio. Sorry, I think I will have to reproduce it anyway. The PY. The situation when the visitor faces the maximum price that they can afford paying. In this case, of course, the level of utility is close, so equal to the minimum possible, and these things, this calls for rethinking what may this line segment represent, CD. When a person, again, we asked them voluntarily to name these two prices, the optimal, the comfortable price and the maximum price. So when the respondents provided their answers, they had something in mind. They had some decision mechanism in their minds. So this second line segment, well, seems to be attributed to special or forced conditions effect, in the sense that we are ready to pay more when we are forced to do it. For example, the things that come to mind if a person needs to occupy their children somehow for some time, for a couple of hours, or again, change scenery and, well, just go outside and have some fun outside. So these are the two things which we hope allow us to get closer to the motivation of this kind of decision making. This is the first part, and the second part in which this model may be helpful, at least it was helpful in constructing some specific indexes. We constructed two of them. First of all, based on the information on the comfortable prices. Well, here I derive some equations, and I will explain in a second. A simple relative index of sensitivity to the online format, or to feeling this aura of actual physical art pieceworks. We constructed this index, and the considerations were the following. So if we get the comfortable prices, but now on this in this picture, two budget lines, we forget for a second about the indifference curves. We just combine two budget constraints. The blue line goes for the online excursion type, and the red line goes for the offline excursion type. And usually our respondents, they gave us the answers like this. For them, the comfortable price for an online excursion on average was smaller, and actually much smaller than the one for the offline excursion. And if we look at this picture, just give a geometric interpretation. Again, the black line here is corresponds to the situation when we have the prices being zero, so the excursions go for free. So we combine based on the assumption that in one day a person may take only one type of excursion. Well, again, it takes time anyway. So the combination of these two budget constraints for the comfortable prices for the online excursion type and for the offline excursion type, they would give us this kind of graph. How is it valuable, and how can be helpful in understanding something about the behavior of these visitors. Basically, these differences, these distances AC, AD, is the number of units of good Y, which the visitor is ready to give up, just literally give up to participate in this excursion, to take on this excursion. Here, by the way, again, I combine both the online and offline excursions. And again, as I mentioned, we can see that in general, this was empirically supported in our sample, people are ready to give up less when we talk about the comfortable prices of the online excursions as compared to the comfortable prices of the offline excursions. And this well, allows to derive well, a very simple relative index indeed of what we think as sensitivity to the offline format. The preference of feeling the aura of the physical objects, something like this. If we relate these two segments, CD, so the difference to the whole weight, to the AD line, which will show us again the relative change, the relative difference here. And with simple calculations, we arrive to an index like this, which fortunately allows us to get rid of the price and the need to find out the price of this PY and base our calculations only on this subjective comfortable prices for the both type of the excursions. If we look very briefly at this thing, and a little bit more extended discussion is given in the draft paper of this this research. Well, we can see that if these prices subjectively coincide, then well, the index is equal to 0, some baseline. If the person prefers the online format better, and again, one of the assumptions was that the price, the more you're ready to pay, the more loyal you are to the corresponding format. Then the index has negative values proportionally, and the opposite positive values. So again, as a simple measure of this kind of thing, as again, this CD is the difference between the two formats, basically. The person, on average, indeed is ready to give up more in favor of the offline format, again, in a comfortable manner, under the comfortable conditions. So this is the index, and it was later calculated and employed in our research, further research. So this is the story. We can do the same trick with the maximum prices, which were named by these visitors, these respondents. And based on this, we also construct a simple relative index, but in this case, we believe that this is the index for overall preference of the online format. The difference is that, as I discussed before, when we talk about maximum prices, we basically speak about some forced conditions. So when people have to, well, they indeed have to pay some extra money to, well, again, to occupy their children, or just to go outside and do something different as compared to what they did at home. So in this case, again, the principle is the same. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but under maximum prices, this difference, this relative difference, CD over AD, means that, again, if the person is ready to pay more for the online format, we can try to measure, again, subjectively, and this is the beauty, we can measure subjectively relatively how much more, and we can construct this index of preference of the online format specifically for each of the people. And since they are individual and relative, we believe that we can compare them between different different people. So for all the respondents, just to wrap up and to let Valeria speak, we calculated these indices and we'll employ them in our model. And let me step forward a little bit. It was quite successful to our mind. Valeria, I'm ready to take over.
Yes, 1 second.
Okay, thank you. I will stop sharing.
Thank you. So, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Let's do like this. Yes, good afternoon, dear colleagues. I will briefly discuss sample collection part. So let's move. As you already know, we conducted our research at the State Hermitage Museum in second wave of COVID-19. This place was selected as a location for our field study for several reasons. The first one, that this place is highly popular, and the second one, that this place had exhibition during the COVID-19. Moreover, it's a regime facility, so from this perspective, our data is unique and have a high value. The type of our research, as I said, is a field study. Primary data was collected by face-to-face structural interviews. Respondents were selected randomly. In average, survey time was 25 minutes. In total, 59 visitors participated in the study. Oh, sorry. Let's briefly cover the questionnaire. The survey consists of 29 questions, open-ended and close-ended. A full text you can see later in our appendix. There were 4 blocks: social demographic, opinion questions about the online format, questions about the pandemic restrictions, and the financial block. And I want to remind you that our survey was protested with the SEBA team help. Let's move on to the sample description. Here you can find the descriptive statistics in this slide. The statistical analysis were done with the RStudio statistical package. And firstly, we established an age limit. So this forced us to delete 2 respondents under the age of 16. Secondly, we applied the procedure of detecting outliers by classical methods like box plots and histograms, and after that we removed other outliers, and 55 valid responses were retained for our analysis. All crucial variables you could find in our text. I will present a general portrait of the visitor, of the respondent. It's a female resident of St. Petersburg, at the age of 32, working, visited cultural places several times a year. What is interesting, that only 18% of respondents have work related to the art sphere. Most of them believe that online will not replace offline. And approximately 40% are willing to pay for the online museum programs. Let's move on. Such simple methods as contingency tables has occurred very useful for our data analysis, because it helps us to verify that data for adequacy, and moreover, it's helped us to get some insights regarding our hypothesis. In this slide, these slides represent some curious facts which were made by using these tables. For example, most of art workers were from Moscow or St. Petersburg, and for most, income has not changed during the pandemic. The most preferred formats were online excursions, thematic videos, interviews, virtual visits, and we think that it's most likely they were chosen because such formats were represented very poorly or not represented by museums at all. And the most interesting finding is that the quality of online programs has assessed neutrally or positively by the majority of respondents. But despite the quality, the same people said that online will never replace the offline. And this already leads us to our assumption that quality most likely has nothing to do with the willingness to visit the online programs or to even pay for them. Let's move on. After such analysis, we run the cluster analysis. And you can see there that our sample was divided into two clusters, and the main distinguished feature was the respondent location. So the biggest cluster is the respondents who live in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and the second cluster is the respondents who were from regions. Let's move to cluster description. The first cluster is 50% male. The average age is 34, 70% is working. And what's interesting, as I said, 27% have profession related to art sphere. The main distinguished feature is that it's people from Moscow or St. Petersburg. The average sale in these regions is 17,000 rubles. And their frequency to visit cultural places much higher. They visit them several times a year or a month. Let's go to the closer to the tables. Almost entire cluster confident that online will not replace offline, but the quality is neutral or positive. What it says to like neutral or positive. Most of the respondents from this cluster would go to the museums even with restrictive measures. However, most of people, as you can see, they feel discomfort from the restrictive measures. From the table of the reasons, it's number 3. You can see that people more often choose a place, or how they choose the place that they visited. It's the atmosphere or the habit to it. This reinforces our intuition that our assumption that about our assumption that people care about the place, and so they are more financially loyal to it. So during the COVID period, they go to them, buy tickets, and so on. Next, you can see that they would like to, 21% would like to support, but do not support museums before. And the main reason, despite the salary situation, is not it. It's they don't understand how to support the museums, and 42% of the respondents they are willing to pay for online programs and mostly for the unique content. Let's move on to the cluster number 2. So briefly, I will briefly name the main social demographic features. 14% male, average age 31, 68 working, and only 4% of working respondents, they are work related to the art. The main distinguished feature that these people from the regions. Average salary is lower, it's 31,000 rubles, and their frequency is low to go to the museums or galleries, lower too. They usually visit it once a year or several times a year. If you look closely at the numbers at the tables, you will see, despite the fact that it's another cluster with and it's differ in frequency and the salary and other features from the first one, that's almost all trends persist in their relation to the online restrictions and so on. So that's why we have decided not to divide recommendation and our models by the clusters and keep our sample as one and make recommendations on it. And next slide is about the PCA analysis. It was helpful too. It was carried out for the entire sample. And I said yes, previously why we decided to do it by this. We can see again that the quality of online programs has nothing to do with the online payment for online events. And because they are just lying in almost opposite direction from each other, that's we can think that this disprove our hypothesis number 7. And it's also can be seen that willingness to pay for online is associated with the financial loyalty to the museum as a whole, which partly confirms our hypothesis number 3. And from this screenshot, you can also see that the maximum offline prices, they associated with the desire to visit cultural places more often if the participants know about the lockdown. This may support our hypothesis that the commitment to physical space of the museum or a gallery has a positive effect on the desire to support it. Yes, the next part is for the Evgenii. So I stop my screen.
Okay, thank you, Valeria. I will again take it from here. I will briefly talk about the results of estimation that we obtained. Sorry, I will adjust it a little bit. Based on our sample and the constructed theoretical model, we applied the well-known partial least squares structural equation modeling technique, correcting, of course, using the bootstrap calculation to derive the corresponding p-values with correction for bias and acceleration due to the peculiarities of our sample. So here you can see the principal sketch of the obtained results. They correspond principally to the model, but I will just give you a couple of heads ups on what is going on here. To a lot of our hypotheses as represented by the corresponding arrows, we actually obtained statistical support, even taking into account that our sample was quite small. So, for example, sensitivity to art does statistically significantly influence the commitment to the physical space, the offline space of the museum, which in turn influences positively and significantly influences financial loyalty of the of the visitors, which in turn, well, the p-value is 6.1%, but again, we think that this is quite a statistically significant result, which in turn influences the readiness to participate in the online format. Basically, if we look generally at this graph, we can see that it is the sensitivity to art at large which has the biggest number of statistically significant results, the connections. So it influences all these things, the fidelity to the offline space of the museum, directly influences the readiness to participate in the online format, and also influences positively the value of the online format at large. Quite surprisingly, this was quite a robust result. We ran several calculations. This hypothesis, this connection, the value of online format at large, we did not find statistically significant influence on the readiness to participate in the online format. This may be a little bit strange, and we are still pondering the implications of this thing. But in general, what can we say here? For several regressions in this system, we obtained quite high R-squareds, and again, as I mentioned, in a lot of cases, the p-values were really small, which spoke in favor of the statistical significance of the corresponding effects. So to summarize the conclusions about the hypothesis that we made, out of these 7 hypotheses, we see that 2 of them, number 1 and number 7, did not find a statistical support, at least based on our calculations. And we saw it, and as Valeria mentioned it, we saw it both from the exploratory data analysis and from this formal estimation of this model. Other 5, they found the support, and again, I'm not going to read them. You can see them on the slide. So majorly, the principal conclusion probably here is that it is sensitivity to art which allows which influences the principal things, the principal components in this scheme. Well, this is it, and I'm ready to give the final word to Sofiia.
It's not Sofiia, it will be me.
Sorry, Valeria.
Yes, 1 second. Yes. So you see my screen, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So yes, let's move on to the recommendations. So the first one is museums and galleries are recommended to build a loyal audience through participation or through educational programs. As evident from our results of quantitative analysis, as Evgenii already said, that the sensitivity to art is a determinant for almost all variables. Thus, the development of commitment to the arts among the audience, it's a potential thing for the museums, and they should invest in this sphere. For example, the State Darwin Museum has a program, Favorite Visitor. This program allows visitors, thus selected members, to develop their own project led by scientists and other experts, attend exclusive excursions, act as experts in educational project, and so on. And the next recommendation, that's the willingness to support the museum financially significantly affects the willingness to participate in online formats. So the idea is to suggest people to seek the online format as the opportunity to support museums and galleries. especially during such situation as a pandemic. The most widespread support nowadays is endowment funds. However, such a type of collecting donation for the museum is not mass and not available for all visitors. We think that commercialized online activities with a clear, simple mechanism of payments may create a basis for obtaining the needed financial support. Yes, so we gave such a recommendation. So thank you for your attention. We are ready to answer your questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Let me just say that this is a nice work. I have a question or two. One has to do with the specification. So effectively, there's no alternative specification, right? You just have this path diagram, right? So this SEM, but there are no tests of alternative specifications or tests of that specification aside from the R squared that it gives.
What do you mean alternative specifications? Because this path structure is based on the theoretical model.
I understand. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, any more general theoretical model or any nested theoretical model that could be tested with the same data. I'm just thinking in terms of if you send this to a journal, that would be my second question. But if it's a somewhat of a methodology journal, they would probably want to see how sensitive the results are to twists to the specification. If you perhaps you drop some of the latent variables, or if you generalize it to something more, to something larger as a concept, would that be a better fit?
Well, it's hard to say actually. Probably Sofiia will help me. This model was constructed based on a solid literature review, and well, in some good sense, it's quite comprehensive. Sofiia, am I correct?
Yes, but I also don't really get the question. Do you want us to specify more the tests or the general idea of the concept?
No, let me ask you, Lem, the second question. This should go to some art journal, some SEM journal, some art economics journal. What type of journal do you think this will go to?
We are aiming at journal on the curating and museum management. So I think that the journal will not be looking really deep into the quantitative analysis rather than on the literature review.
Yeah, okay, good. And I assume that Valeria, the other Valeria, also made sure that the art theory of this has been
yes, don't worry about it. She is not able to be here with us today. She has lectures at the university.
I know.
Yes, Valeria Kulcheva is the leading author on this paper, so the art part on this, I think it's quite nicely captured and covered. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again for the interesting presentation. So we can stop the recording.